Tonight on Blaze News, The Mandate, Matt sits down with Jeremy Carl to honor the memory of Charlie Kirk. Welcome in, everyone. I'm Jill Savage here with my friend and colleague, Matthew Peterson, and we will end this week with a spotlight of the life of Charlie Kirk. And Charlie was more than a conservative icon. He was a faithful warrior for Christ, relentless in his ideas and tireless in his actions.
Joining us now is Matt Peterson. Matt, you're from The Blaze. You're launching Frontier magazine. Tell the audience about it and get that mic right up.
Yeah, well, Charlie, as you know, when we say this is a movement, we mean it's more than just a political movement. So as important as voting is, and it's essential, beyond that, what this movement is about is establishing an American way of life that's worthy of the name in the 21st century. And that means shifting the culture in a way that far beyond just political commentary. And Frontier magazine that Blaze has put out is all about that.
How do people get it, access it, and order it?
It's at blazemedia.com. You just go to Frontier.
Yeah, so tell us about how things are going at The Blaze. You guys are creating this really powerful media juggernaut. Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, it's been an incredible year. I mean, there's a lot of new faces, new shows. Jill Savage and I at Blaze News Tonight are over at the booth over there.
What do you make of this moment that we're in, this new American Renaissance? You're a deep thinker. In fact, you're a teacher of mine. I've taken informal, but formal classes from you with the Claremont Institute. What is your analysis of this moment that we are entering as a country?
Well, I wish every student was like you. He reads the words. I think that right now you can't underestimate the opportunity that we have, because this is a completely different universe than we lived in before November.
It's a once in many lifetimes opportunity.
Yes.
Give some action items on how people can turn that into applicable action steps, because we get that question all the time. What can I do? What can I do?
And what you need to do first is find people of like mind. You'd be surprised at what you can create in any sector, really, of America right now, because there are like-minded people like you who want to build new things. So first you have to find those people. Don't be isolated, right? And there's lots of people looking to invest and to build the new stuff that I know a lot of people here want to do.
Blaze website again?
That's at theblaze.com.
Oh, pretty easy.
Blaze/Frontier.
All right, okay.
Easy to find.
Matt, you're a great man. Thank you for everything you do for the country. Give it up for Matt Peterson, everybody.
One of the things that I love about that interview is Matt multitasks all the time. Charlie Kirk is multitasking in that interview. But the reason that he was calling you his teacher there is because the two of you met at the Claremont Institute.
Yeah, it was in 2021. Of course, I mean, it was great to be at AmFest, and I'm at AmFest in part because of Jill Savage saying we need to go to AmFest, and it was great to see him and interact with him there. But this was in 2021 when, as you'll hear in a moment, I was hesitant to even invite him to the Lincoln Fellowship at first, but he became a Lincoln Fellow. So there was an incredible time in the summer of 2021 when I was there teaching and overseeing the program. Charlie was there, Jeremy Carl was there, Terry Schilling was there, and other friends there for this incredible summer. And this is where Jeremy was also introduced to Charlie.
Well, some bourbons chase trends. Flying Ace chases legacy. It's straight bourbon the way that it was meant to be. Bold, balanced, and unapologetically American. There's no fluff or gimmicks. It's just real whiskey made for people who believe in hard work, high standards, and doing things the right way. And Flying Ace delivers every time. It's not about hype. It's about heritage. It's about getting back to what bourbon was always supposed to be. So if that sounds like you're kind of poor, it's time to level up. You can buy it online at flyingacespirits.com and use the code BLAZE for free shipping.
So Jeremy, we both really got to know Charlie Kirk in 2021 at the Claremont Institute Lincoln Fellowship. And I wanted to start this by reading something from another person who was there, our mutual friend Terry Schilling, who runs APP, does great work for the family. He put out a tweet recently, and he said this. He's stunned. He just finished the candidate meeting, and he saw the text about Charlie's murder. But I wanted to read this. My real measure of the man, Terry says, came when we were both selected as 2021 Lincoln Fellows at the Claremont Institute. I was skeptical at first, but over those 10 days, he absolutely blew me away. Back then, American Principles Project was still finding its footing. During introductions, I said I was president of an organization building the NRA for families, and Charlie's head snapped up. I remember this. The moment the session ended, he made a beeline for me, telling me he loved the concept and wanted to help. And then Terry goes on to say how, of course, Charlie did help him when the American Principles Project was just getting started, and he helped him grow that organization. And you can show the picture of Terry and Charlie. I feel like this was a story that many people have similar stories about Charlie, and this was kind of the spirit of that 2021 Lincoln Fellowship when we were all together, and many of us really got to know Charlie. And I just, before we start, want to say, there was almost a world in which he never was at that Lincoln Fellowship, a story I really haven't told publicly. Like many people, I was skeptical as well when I was running those fellowship programs of Charlie. I thought, I'd heard in the past what I would call sort of normie-con sentiments coming from Charlie. I wasn't sure if he knew what time it was. I wasn't sure if he was ready to build the new right. And he was in a famous debate with Tucker. I was very much on Tucker's side and couldn't believe, at the time, it seems like one of the rare times that Charlie was destroyed in public, right? Tucker really took him to task on some issues. But what I didn't know was that Charlie was intellectually curious and coming around. So anyway, I thought, well, he's important. And a donor, mutual friend of Charlie's and mine, Michael Burstein, said, you really have to invite him. You need to, invite him to apply to the Lincoln Fellowship. And I thought, well, he is important. I'm not sure about him. I initially had very negative thoughts, early on. I didn't know whether his organization, I didn't know much about Turning Point at the time, too. I thought, is this a grift? Is he some kind of bobblehead figure, right? And I looked into it and thought, well, no, he is really serious, and he's really done some amazing things. We should at least invite him. So I sent one email to him and his assistant through that mutual friend donor, and there was no response. And I thought, he's a busy guy, whatever, but I'm not going to chase him. I'm trying to do him a favor. That's the way I looked at it. And I just let it go. And then a year later, I think the next Lincoln Fellowship, Charlie said, hey, I was really busy last year. I really want to go to this. And he made it clear that he really wanted to go to that fellowship program. He was really desirous of learning and meeting Claremont. And it was just so apparent to me. I said to, the whole committee, like, look, this guy's self-selecting this time. He really wants to be here. We should give him a shot. And everyone agreed, and he came. And the rest was history.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he was really terrific in that fellowship, and I had sort of similar views at the time probably to what you did. I mean, I knew he'd been really successful as a political organizer and as a speaker, but, I didn't really think that much beyond that. And then I had a piece in First Things just about my own relationship with Charlie, where I recount sort of how we met, and then I'd given a talk at the fellowship. And, about an hour afterwards, I got a text, and it was asking me a bunch of questions about the talk and saying it was really good. And I didn't know who was even from at first. And so I was sort of like looking around the room because it was clearly from an attendee, but I wasn't even sure who it was because I didn't have Charlie's name in my phone directory. And to this day, I actually don't even know how he got my number. But then I looked around and I figured out that it was actually Charlie who was asking these really good questions. And we struck up a conversation afterwards and just got to know each other a little bit then. And it was really clear that, as you said, I mean, he was curious. And as I grew to know over time, I mean, he was really, really smart. Mm-hmm. The fact that he was kind of doing all this populist stuff should not give anybody any illusions about that. I mean, he was an extremely bright guy. He was an extremely curious guy. There's even a kind of mutual friend. I'm not going to name him here, but I was talking to him once, but like a very sort of prominent new right guy, sort of very, very high-end intellectual, the sort of person who you thought would have been like very, very skeptical of Charlie just kind of on the surface. And I was talking to him a few years ago, and I said, hey, I really think that this Charlie Kirk guy, he is not just a talking head. I mean, he's a real person of substance, and he's really smart. And I was kind of trying to convince him of this, and I was really surprised. This guy said, no, I actually totally agree with you. I mean, I'm really, really impressed with the guy. It was just over time, just built that relationship, and it was a a real privilege to know him, not just because of his abilities, but because of his character, which I'm sure we can get into later.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, this wonderful piece, if we can pull that up, your tribute to Charlie, faithful warrior. You have this line. There's a line in there. Each of his talents was rare, and together they were almost unprecedented in one individual. Talk a little bit about that, because it was as if he had super friend talents combined within him.
Yeah, and I think that's probably honestly one of the reasons that at first, I didn't come in and take him super seriously as some intellectual figure, because you're looking at this guy and he's obviously this really dynamic public speaker, and he's this great fundraiser, and he's an organizer, and you're like, well, that's all, people who are really good at that, that's kind of what they're good at. And, they're not necessarily bringing a million other things to the table, but by the way, that's really plenty. But no, in fact, it turned out that he was also just a really smart and curious person. He was just incredibly shrewd about how he thought about things, and just also just a person beyond that. And this is even more unusual, as you know, in the world that we're in, where often appearances are not reality. I mean, he was had great character, and I think that was a genuine character. And I was fortunate that I was actually able to return in a small way some of the favors he did for me early on in our relationship. But he did a lot of things to help me out when I couldn't have possibly returned those favors, and my profile was obviously much smaller than his. And so, I think it spoke to the sort of person he was. And if you kind of go on X, you can see a lot of people telling that sort of story about their own relationships with Charlie.
I think, yeah, what you said about, him being a good moral character, I mean, it really is true. I mean, I can't say it enough to people. TV lies to you, as a friend of mine used to say. I mean, this is anything time you see a face on a screen, right? AI can do that. An actor can do that. You don't actually know what these people are like. But you talk about his faith, and you talk about this tweet he put out just days before his murder, when he says Jesus defeated death so you can live. And this is not, a lot of people will do this, and it really annoys me when people do this, in fact, and they're not even trying, right? You know them in their personal lives, right, and they send you this thing, and in Christ, blah blah blah, and you know that they're. Somebody used to joke, this is how Catholics fight, like F you in Christ, so and so, But when he put those tweets out, he really meant it, and you talk about this.
Absolutely, and you see this in some of the tributes that his wife gave him as a spiritual leader while he was alive, in the work that he did with the Turning Point Faith. In general, I mean, it was really clear, and he said it over and over again in interviews, that his faith was at the center of who he was. And I think that was reflected not just in the kind of like a sort of Theo-bro way where he was super orthodox on every point, although I don't know any ways that he wasn't small O orthodox. I mean, I think he definitely hewed very closely to all the traditional doctrines, but just in the way that he met people with grace, and that he attempted to practice Christian charity in his interactions, and that he was really, the full Christian man in the biggest sense of that term. And it really came out in just his everyday interactions with people. Yeah.
Yeah. And this, it's interesting that, there's so many people like yourself, like Terry, like myself, with, let's say, as you said, smaller profiles, whom he helped along and helped their organizations grow and their efforts. I was just looking at texts inspired by you earlier, and I saw when we made we made one of the first ads for J.D. Vance running for Senate. And, even back then, Charlie was like, JD is essential, JD,
Yeah.
JD is going to break the dam, and it's going to flow through him, he knew this.
No, absolutely. Particularly with JD. And he was so passionate about JD, particularly for becoming vice president. He was really pushing that, not just publicly, but privately. Mm-hmm. So, and I think it, that and Don Jr. probably had the biggest effect on President Trump's thinking. So again, they're just enormously influential. And I think if you look at how Vice President Vance is doing in that role, it's just a vindication of Charlie's political judgment.
Yeah. Yeah, and you see that in Vance's tribute post to him, where he also makes this point that Charlie genuinely believed in and loved Jesus Christ. He had a profound faith. They argued about Catholicism and Protestantism and who was right. And because he loved God, again, he wanted to understand. He was always seeking truth. And, you know, Charlie, at the interview at the J.D. Vance event, we talked about statesmanship beforehand, and he had this to say about J.D. Vance there, and you can see, you know, his true thoughts in this clip.
Well, first of all, I mean, JD's a great friend, so I'm, you know, incredibly biased. I was one of the first people to endorse him for Senate, like right out of the gate. I was day one or day two. And it wasn't that I knew that he one day would be president. I knew that this is what we need more of. A deep thinker, understands the issues, also a really wonderful family man, an entrepreneur. And so it's just been the hand of the Lord to see him ascend now to the vice presidents and maybe one day to be president of the United States. If that's, you know, the Lord's will, and I'm going to be working hard on that any way I possibly can. But there's a lot of work you have to do here. But look, I mean, he's again, I'll go back to this. He's a very thoughtful person, and having dealt with him now as the vice president, he is constantly courting other people's opinions, very similar to President Trump. He understands the philosophical, but also the real. He doesn't just live in the clouds. He also lives in the weeds and the real life implications. And as a true statesman, he never forgot where he came from. He never forgot that he came from rural Ohio and Appalachia, and that is the connective tissue of his politics, which almost always reverts back to, okay, would 8-year-old J.D. Vance benefit from this? And the answer is yes, then okay, he'll work his way through that from not another unnecessary war, right? From restrictive immigration, from better trade policies. And J.D. Vance is someone, as a statesman, you must also be able to be made for the moment. Some people cripple under the moment. They crumble under the moment. And look at this. He was vice presidential nominee. He was barely a senator for 2 years, and he excelled in every single way. He's also a man of phenomenal moral courage. I mean, I wouldn't want to go straight to Germany with a NATO meeting and call them all. I mean, that takes some chutzpah, right? There's some guts there. But for all those reasons, J.D. Vance is more than deserving for that award.
Jeremy, can you comment on that, those remarks that he made and the appropriateness of what we see now with J.D. Vance bringing him home?
Yeah, again, just I would certainly echo everything that he said about J.D. Vance. It shows Charlie's, again, his incredible political perceptiveness and also his ability, by the way, to communicate that to you in such a precise way. I mean, I could have said maybe some of those same things about J.D. Vance, but it would have taken me 5 times as long. I mean, he just really hit on all the essential points. And I think it was really clear from J.D. Vance's Twitter tribute to Charlie that his feelings for Charlie were likewise just he had enormous admiration and respect for him, and did so much that he wanted to sort of pay him and his widow this honor in as big a way as he could.
Yeah, the political savvy of the guy. I mean, someone was telling me last night. There are people in the Trump family who credit him with 2016 and saying that Michigan, in particular, was somewhere that had to hit hard way back then. That he was very politically savvy about actually getting things done. And like you said, this should be in a way the point of this show. The point that you made earlier that you wanted to judge the guy because he was good at different things. So you wanted to, pigeonhole him in one thing. And I'm the same way. If someone's good at fundraising, right, or building, you're like, well, then they're not an intellectual, right? Or this person's an intellectual, so they're not good at that. But this guy was just good at all these things. I mean, he's a political strategist as well. Right. And you had a lot of interactions with him in 2024, right, related to the election?
Yeah, absolutely. And in the run up to the election, I mean, we would text back and forth. And again, look, I'm not gonna make myself into more to Charlie Kirk. I mean, he was a lot to me, but I wasn't in his 1,000 closest friends, I'm sure, right? But nonetheless, like I would text him, and I would always hear back from him, and usually pretty quickly. And then particularly in the run up to the election, we were texting probably 30, 40 times a day, particularly as the early votes started coming in. And I brought, and this was another just, great thing about him. I brought this woman, Data Republican, to his attention. And now she's a very prominent sort of figure on X, and she has a lot of followers. But at the time, she was a very small account, probably 10,000 or less or fewer followers. But I was just, having watched her, I was like, this person really has a lot of ability. And so I went to Charlie and I said, hey, because he was sort of saying, well, who's the best person to look at the early vote data and things like that and tell us what's going on? I said, I have this friend and she's anonymous. And by the way, she's deaf and autistic. And, just telling you this FYI, but I think she's the best at what she's doing. And the amazing thing about Charlie is he didn't care, of course, about any of that, right? And he trusted the judgment. He liked me for whatever reason. And so he trusted my judgment and, allowed me to bring her into Charlie's circle. And she just did phenomenal work in particular. And we would go back and forth, again, like probably 40 times a day. I have no idea how he was doing this while running Turning Point, while doing all these other things, but just trying to help him deploy some of his resources smartly and messaging smartly in those last weeks. So it was really amazing. And by the way, she was not the only person. I brought a couple other people into Charlie's orbit who he was able to raise in profile a tremendous amount. And these people were not really prominent people, but they were good. And Charlie just had an incredible knack for finding those people and also trusting other people in his network to find people who he could work with. And again, just so an incredible manager and developer of talent in addition to all of his other skills.
Yeah, amen to that. Yeah, and I think a bunch of points there that you make are important. One is I hate the every time there's a tragic death when people try to glom on, and we're not playing who's Charlie's best friend. That's ridiculous. We
right.
Both of us are not in the top list of his best pals or whoever those people are. But at the same time, I think this is an important discussion because what we both do professionally or career-wise is we're sort of connoisseurs of people and moving this movement forward, right? And putting people together and really engaging in this space and building this movement. And in that respect, I think we're both speaking from a position of knowledge to tell people exactly, how this guy operated, how he was the real deal. Who was just martyred, days ago in broad daylight, slaughtered on an afternoon in America, and part of this is he was a guy who we were skeptical about because we just saw him through one lens early on, didn't really know him, and then also he was looking to learn what was going on and how to be most effective because he was mission driven, and I think the bigger context here is, why did you need to bring new people to him? Why did you need to bring new voices to him? Well, because the right was old and calcified, and he had kind of grown up in it, but he was a true believer, and he evolved to see the need for a new right and to see change on the right. And that's what his learning, what we did at Claremont, what we did later on, was seeing that, wait a minute, the old ways aren't working. The old guys are wrong about how to approach this reality.
We want to say thanks for watching and listening to this show. Blaze TV exists because people like you refuse to settle for all the watered-down coverage that's out there, the endless spin that we have to deal with. But this company has never been about just one company or one voice. It's about a movement of people who refuse to sit on the sidelines. And we need to carry this mission forward. So when you subscribe, you're not just supporting the show, you're actually making sure that the truth has a platform for today and the next generation. So join us for Blaze TV. You can go to blazetv.com/BNT and get $20 off right now. It's as low as $8 a month for an annual plan. It's blazetv.com/BNT.
And there's probably no better example of that than I think how he helped you and supported you in the book that you wrote, The Unprotected Class. This book was basically saying it's okay to be white, which is somehow controversial. But The Unprotected Class, would be a controversial book for the old right to even talk about at all, and yet that wasn't the case with Charlie, huh?
No, that's right. And this was again just I had the relationship with him, but we weren't like best friends or anything. But I asked him to read the book and offer an endorsement, and he was really kind enough to do that, even though, of course, particularly at the time, I mean, one of the things that's been gratifying about the book is I think it's moved the discussion to a much more publicly acceptable place. But at the time, that was a really kind of edgy thing to be doing. And I think the vast majority of kind of mainstream political pundit types would not have touched it. And Charlie was really kind to offer both this really valuable dust jacket endorsement from this really big, important figure. And beyond that, he had me on his show multiple times to discuss it and said a lot of nice things about me in the book there. And then also we discussed some of the issues that I was raising in depth and sort of put that before his audience and maybe got them to think that, hey, this is an okay thing to be concerned about and talk about. And again, that just shows his bravery. And again, I'd say he was a guy who was always growing. And I think part of the reason why we maybe had this view of him when he came in to Claremont was that early on, he was so young. He was so young. He started this business when he was 18. He, of course, didn't have fully developed views. And it took him a little while, right, to sort of figure these things out, as it would take for everybody. But because he was smart and because he wanted to learn, he did, as you said, and he understood some of the old ways weren't working and was willing to try on new things and bring the conservative movement, and particularly young conservatives, along with him. And I think a part of the manifold tragedy of his death is I think, Charlie was still evolving. He was still growing. He was still reading. He was still learning. And just where he would have gone, it would have really been amazing. I kind of jokingly would try to get him to run for president someday, not realizing, although if I'd been a little more perceptive, I should have, that in fact, there are a lot of other people who were giving him that same message. That's not something I'd done with anybody else in my adult life, but I thought he was just such a unique talent that he was really somebody who had that type of ceiling, and that's why it's just one of many reasons that it's so tragic. His untimely assassination.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough that the almost shock of that first week meeting him was this pleasant surprise of, oh my gosh, this guy is actually, very based, as we say, but it was the voracious, appetite for learning, asking questions, and the sharpness you could see was there. It was all of a sudden a revelation to me. I mean, we were all like, this guy's incredible. And it was for the most part a great class. Like we had an incredible group of people, and you could just see, wait a minute, this is exactly the guy. This is he has all the talent all the way around, because he's not only able to build something, he's not only able to raise money, which is actually going to be a different talent, but he is looking to actually build all this for a reason, and he's looking to do it to actually be effective with reality on the ground, which I think is why he was willing to talk about anti-white racism in your book. He was just looking at reality and the truth as he saw it, and then how do we address that? Yeah. With a kind of confidence too that, one thing I've been thinking about is, I want to be more like Charlie in that. A kind of positivity. I'm more of a cynical guy, too much positivity sort of drives me nuts sometimes. But he did it with realism, right? I mean, I think that's why he would attack these controversial issues and just not give an F, because he didn't care about anything else other than doing a job. Does that make sense?
Right. No, absolutely. And I think Charlie was in every sense a happy warrior. And sometimes when we use that term, it sometimes describes people a little bit who are a little bit too much happy and maybe not enough warrior. But Charlie was really both. I mean, he really was a joyous person. He was a friendly person. He was a person who met people eagerly, who had very different views than him, and treated them with compassion and grace. And yet he never backed down from his own principles. And there was even one or two times where I was like, whoa, Charlie, slow your roll a little bit with this. I mean, this is maybe true, but I'm not sure that you want to kind of like go all the way there yet. But he just didn't care. I mean, he really didn't. And that's kind of what I grew to understand about him. And also beyond the fact that he just didn't care because he knew that his own intentions were pure, and that his values were good, he had an incredible sense. And J.D. Vance refers to this in the very moving, piece that he put out on X of, when he could push the envelope and when to be more conventional, I think is how JD put it. And that's exactly right. I mean, he knew sometimes he'd really push stuff out and then he'd kind of reset a little while later and kind of get to a place that made everybody more comfortable and to realize, this is not some nutty, crazy, wild-eyed guy out there. And he just had an incredible sense to do that and how to thread that needle. And again, it's so rare for anybody to have that ability. But for him, that was just like ability number 13 in his talent stack.
Yeah, and the influence that came from that is really remarkable too. I mean, one of the things that's just amazing about his rise, and again, part of the strategy is that he's so needed. He's so needed right now on the national stage. Is that he rose to influence the president of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump, in a very open, honest, serious way. And President Trump has some great people around him, is notably his family, J.D. Vance and others. But also there's always people around the president who don't necessarily give him great advice. And there's always people pining to get, in front of him. And Charlie's just one of these rare people who actually, I think, understood Trump and was doing it for the right reasons, trying to move the country forward. I want to play and get your comments on Charlie talking about Donald Trump.
The binary that must be created is your elected official shallow or deep? And people think President Trump is shallow, but he's actually a very, very deep person, incredibly so. And what do I mean by that? Do they think about the deeper things? Are they willing to challenge pre-existing dogmas? I mean, J.D. Vance is objectively a deep person. He reads the great books. He understands philosophy. So you break that into kind of two different categories, and then you look at some of the people that have infected our congressional space. I would not think deep would be a word that we would use.
No.
And so I think we need people that are deeper, that are thoughtful, that are there also for the better worldview and the better view to win, not just who's going to be able to get conference.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on Trump and Kirk?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think he was very perceptive about Trump. He was one of the people early on when I think it was unclear to me, who the guy was going to be, particularly when Trump was at a low point post, 2020 and being out of office. He was always very insistent to me, both publicly, obviously he was doing that, but privately, that Trump was the guy. There was no other guy out there, and that he really just understood Trump at a deeper level, and he appreciated Trump at a deeper level. And I think Trump appreciated that about him, that Charlie wasn't coming to him. I saw some reference to, Charlie showed up in the Oval Office a lot, but he never, I think somebody said, abused his privileges, right? He wasn't out there kind of, constantly trying to tell the president what he needed to do, or, out there in a way that was grifting for himself. But, he picked his spots very carefully, and he made a point, and he really was able to make a difference for that reason.
Yeah. I think we should also talk before we talk about what just happened and what needs to happen next, which we will. We should also talk about his understanding of the youth. I mean, his power in a way derived from saying, no, I'm going to go to the young people in America who can be converted, so to speak, and I'm going to take it directly to them. And there, that's a big loss as well. There's very few people who can do that in the way that he did, to the point where South Park is going to caricature him. But let's play this clip about him talking about how this generation is similar to the World War II generation.
The brain drain that has quietly been happening here domestically is that our best and brightest went away from politics and into business the last 30, 40 years, and the virtuous and the good and the noble, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, exactly.
And so then you have kind of a slop that has infested our politics. That's why President Trump stood out so much, is that he was a legitimately high performer outside of politics. So what you're seeing now, at least we see it at Turning Point USA, I know you see it at the Blaze and Claremont, is that the high IQ, high driven, virtuous people are now saying, you know what? Okay, fine, I could go make $200 million at Goldman Sachs, but that's not deep, that's not fulfilling. Right. Yes. Instead, I would rather go be a statesman. Yes. I would rather go work in the State Department. And these are people that could go make a ton of money elsewhere, which means that just monetary gain is not the most important it's not the driving factor or motivator of so many in this generation. That by the way is closer to the World War II generation, the greatest generation, which puts sacrifice and a transcendent ideal above immediate satisfaction, and also the founding generation. And that's where you get amazing accomplishment. When all of a sudden you say, it's not going to always just be about my comfort or my satience, or I'm actually going to put something above. What is that transcendent ideal? And if it is a nation, if even 5% of our brain power started to dedicate themselves to our nation, not just creating the next social media app, imagine if all of a sudden the people that have the capacity and the wherewithal dedicated itself towards a national.
Yeah, dedicated themselves to the nation. What are your thoughts on that, both in terms of his inspiration for a kind of statesmanship of people who actually are able to do the job, and his really rousing description of youth being motivated by the right things now in this generation?
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, again, I think J.D. Vance made reference to this in his remarks about Charlie, that Charlie didn't just kind of help win the election. He's helped staff the administration in a huge way. I can tell you, I mean, I was fortunate. I'm not confirmed for anything yet, but I've been nominated for an assistant secretary of state post and had a number of champions to make that happen. But he specifically referenced the State Department. I don't think any of the champions were more important than Charlie, publicly and privately. And again, I think he did that for a number of other people. But I think even more importantly, when you look at the youth, I know one of my sons is 17, very politically engaged, and sort of Charlie was definitely his North Star. He was really excited that Charlie was going to be coming out to Montana, wanted to make sure we got tickets, which we did when we got out there. And after Charlie died, he kind of went to the gym the next day, and he sent me this text, and it was like, yeah, it's the normal sort of conservative Christian gym bros who are out there lifting, but this time they have like a little more anger in their eyes, and they're lifting heavier weights than ever. And I just thought, wow, that kind of gets right at it, in terms of just the level of inspiration that he had for young people. And I think even most particularly young men, although certainly I think young people in general, he was a huge influence for.
Now, people are describing this moment with the word radicalize, which I don't particularly like. I don't think it gets across what's going on. People on our side even just proudly saying, like, I'm radicalized now, right? And you can say in one split second, one terrible moment, an entire generation was radicalized when he was murdered in front of the nation. But I think by radicalize, all we really mean is they see clearly what the political reality in America is, and how deep that divide is, and what the actual problems facing them in America are, as opposed to maybe a deluded older generation who's still pretending that leftist violence isn't part and parcel of what they've been preaching, and part of a system that is still in place today and that will murder more people in the future.
Yeah, well, and I think it's only radical in the sense that if you look at the etymological roots of radical, it means getting to the root. So it is really getting to the root of problems and not just looking at the surfaces. And it's not that should be met by violence or anything of that sort. Obviously, we would totally condemn those tactics, which have been used so often on the left, but that we need to really move with determination. Determination and the use of the legitimate powers of office and other things that we do have to uproot some of these really destructive trends and kind of dangerous criminals and things like that in our midst right now. And then we just need to be very sober and determined. And as other people have said, kind of just know what time it is right now. And I think Charlie was very clear on that. And I think the young people who are really struggling out there in ways that it's sometimes hard, even as me as a parent of 5, to kind of fully take in, even having kids myself, But I think Charlie was really a North Star for those guys, and it's an incredible loss from that perspective. I mean, he really is just totally irreplaceable.
Yes, totally irreplaceable is right. And I'm trying to think more and more. I'll be thinking throughout the weekend and doing about how we channel that anger and that grief in the days to come in productive ways that do establish justice. And so I'm curious, as we wind down our discussion, what are your thoughts moving forward? I mean, it's so early. There's still mourning. I think the mushroom cloud hasn't even fully, unraveled itself in the American political and cultural life. But I'm especially concerned about Congress and the administration. I think that they should be judged. I think they're on the right team. They're my team. But I think they should be judged by how, in a way, they respond to this moment. Because what needs to happen next is serious repercussions for the entire system, I think, that led to this tragic death. What are your thoughts about what some of those things might be? What do we need to do? So many people are asking that now.
Yeah, well, as it's looking, I mean, again, I want to be a little bit cautious just because obviously it's still developing, but it looks like that we do have the guy and that he, in fact, a person from a fairly normal home and upbringing, as it looks like, who was radicalized by sort of an Antifa or Antifa adjacent network. And I think it shows the importance, first of all, of really going after these networks that have caused crime, disorder, and violence in so many cities. I mean, conservatives have been in particular, the subject of these sorts of violence and violent threats for so long, and nothing's been done, often because this is taking place in blue cities and the political leadership in those places is often somewhat sympathetic to these groups. So I think you need to go there, but I think you also need to go to the universities. And again, I think we've really, obviously the Trump administration has done some yeoman's work already. It's way more than any other administration on the right has done. So yes. I'm not in any way suggesting that nothing's happening, but there just needs to be an even more zero tolerance for the suppression of kind of conservative views or other views that are not popular with the professoriate. We need to have consequences for professors, even who are engaging in not obviously politically protected speech, but violence inciting speech and things like that. And there are a number of those who have come out. So I think it really is going to be a whole of government effort that is needed to show that this type of incitement, this type of kind of violence, it has to have real consequences, and those consequences should be done in a lawful manner and in an orderly manner and in a way that respects the rule of law. But those consequences do need to be there.
Amen to that. We are going to send articles. We're going to be publishing on that, and I want to get as many ideas out there as what needs to happen to encourage the Trump administration to continue to move forward to fight this battle, because we cannot accept, right, what happened this week, what happened to Charlie. And that's not words, right? It needs to be actions that slowly dismantle the edifice that created this situation. Jeremy Carl, thank you.
Well, I loved that conversation with you and Jeremy and Matt. And it's only fitting that we started these Deep Dive Friday interviews with the interview with Charlie Kirk. And we saw several of those clips there in that interview. But just going through, and I remember the conversations that we were having, like, oh, it was July 5th, and he was going to be out there with J.D. Vance. It was a Claremont Institute. J.D. was going to get the Statesmanship Award from there. And I was like, man, this is a bummer when I'm only Claremont adjacent at this point. I can't actually go. And just remembering how excited I was, though, that you were going to go out there and interview Charlie and bring that back for everybody to see.
Yeah, that was great. I mean, it was just a perfect thing to do. If not J.D. Vance, Charlie Kirk is the person to start out the interview series, and so J.D. was speaking, and Charlie did it. And I'm just so happy that actually happened, and that we asked him about statesmanship, because I still think, and I'll keep saying it, that was one of his ultimate goals. I mean, first off, he was trying to get to heaven, where I think he attained that goal as a martyr. But he was also trying to be, beneath that, a statesman doing good for this country and moving it forward. And he did that outside of political office by teaching and inspiring a youth movement. But it is something that he did, and he was aware of what statesmanship was and is, as you could see in that interview. He's keenly aware of what made someone a statesman and what made someone like most of our politicians, which is very much not statesmen.
I'm glad that we played the part about the monetary gain, right? And he was going back to the World War II generation. He's saying that this generation is much like that one in that, you could go make $200 million at Goldman Sachs, but they don't want that right now. They want to be about the movement, and they want to accomplish something. And Charlie was at the forefront of that and leading, a lot of Gen Z there with him.
Yeah, and I think his point is very true. I've seen this in discussions over the last 5 years with guys in their 20s, particularly in tech, but also in other sectors, where they will just come out and say, I want to make money, but ultimately I see these people where that's their only goal, and there's nothing really back of that, and it's not high enough. And they start to see the nobility of politics, the nobility of actually providing something for the common good of the country. And that's really important, because if you don't see that, you got a bunch of selfish a-holes who just kind of go live their little lives, and they don't do anything great, anything noble.
He's been described as a happy warrior, somebody who sought out the truth, who loved Jesus. How are you going to remember Charlie?
I think what increasingly comes to mind is the faith angle of someone who was very vocal about his faith. I feel like I should be more like that. But I think that ultimately I will see him as someone who was the statesman, who looked and saw what needed to be done and did it. And the incredible thing about it was he also showed that at least some rare souls can do 5 or 6 different jobs at once. They can be really good at 3 or 4 things that most people aren't good at once. And I think that, and then also humility, that you can get a lot done, you can be in charge of a lot, and you can always be growing and learning. And be successful because you're humble. That's important.
You didn't want him starting out. That's the funniest part to me, is Matt is so good at identifying talent and placing them and helping out. And he's like, oh, this Charlie kid, I don't know.
He really was. I was like, what I know is he seems like, some bobble-headed guy. I don't know. He seems like a caricature. But I didn't really know him, and I just heard things along the way. And then when I saw he really wanted to come, I thought, well, that all of a sudden signals he's pretty serious, because he doesn't have to do this. And, we had done some due diligence to realize he was not as bad as I first thought. But still, it's like, I'm not going to go, I don't chase names. But once we got to know him, man, that changed everything. And we miss him.
Yeah, Charlie, we love you. And we will continue to try and carry out his mission the best that we can. And we'll talk about that in the days, weeks, and months ahead. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.